This episode is made possible by New Masters Academy, the world's #1 online art school. Check the link down below for a free 7-day trial. Thank you, New Masters Academy. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Honey and Absinthe After Hours podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Vincent, a background designer for animation.
And I'm Janet, the ex-Disney artist turned independent creator. And this is a podcast about all things art, business, and whatever we feel like.
Now today we're going to talk about why it's important to do your research in order to be a successful artist.
But before we get into it, make sure to smash the like button, because it really does help small channels like us out.
Yeah, thanks so much. Now, I was the one who came up with this topic, and I know it's such a stuffy academic thing to talk about, but I think it is really important to talk about if you want to make really cool stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty important, and not too many people talk about it in a way that is easily digestible.
Yes.
So, Vincent.
Yes.
How did you learn how to, quote unquote, do research growing up in, let's say, grade school?
Well, way back when I was in high school, 2015, they taught us back then that we weren't allowed to use the internet to source anything for our papers, for our essays, right?
Yeah.
So, I feel like information these days, like I could just go on Wikipedia and, sort of find out things. But back then, our teachers were like, no, you can't use Wikipedia because anybody can just edit it and put anything. And if anybody can just edit it and put anything, you can't trust it. So I'm sure it's the same for you, where whenever you had a paper due, you had to legit look at the sources and then look at the book and then write down all the information you need and put it at the end for
So where I went to high school, it was a really, really tough academic area, I guess. And I had some really, really intense training, I guess, in the area of research, even at like a young age. So my teachers were really strict about this thing called the MLA format.
Yeah, me too.
And when we were told to research and cite things for things like specifically talking about persuasive essays and stuff like that, they weren't necessarily like, don't use the internet or don't use Wikipedia, but they did, they did say don't use Wikipedia.
Yeah.
But they were they told us to be cautious about using the internet because there's so much out there and you can't really check what's true or not. It's very difficult to, and you have to be aware how to. So they said you can use the internet, you just gotta be able to cite it properly using this format and using the at the time a certain rubric of what makes a source a good source.
Did you have teachers that would dock you just for mistaking, rearranging, missing parts?
Yeah.
It was bad.
It was the worst.
It was bad. I mean, it's good to be thorough like that. I hope teachers are still like that.
Yeah, and I didn't get it at first. I was like, what do you mean? Like, I go on, even at that age, I was like, I go on Google all the time and I just type in whatever. It tells me whatever I want to know. Why is that wrong? But then when I started writing my essay and doing my research and trying to cite properly, I realized exactly what they were saying, that it was really, really hard to cite properly because you're missing all these things and whatever. So I found I would spend hours of my time trying to not even write an essay, trying to gather my citations and my sources. And I get frustrated because I was trying to use Google and it just, nothing fulfilled the requirements properly. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go to the library. So
it's a lot more straightforward. You pick up the book, you just fill out all the things you need, and then there it is.
Yeah.
When you use the internet, you feel like I have to go digging.
Yeah.
And I feel like
the truth.
For the truth. Yeah.
You don't know.
Still do that these days.
Yeah. So I went to the library just to see. I was like, this can't be harder than what I'm currently doing, trying to gather 20 different sources or whatever, because the way my teachers were, at the back of the essay, you needed to make something like an appendix of sources. I forget what it's called. And they require, in order to get an A, because I wanted to be an A student, you had to have a lot of sources. At
Oh
least
my God.
like 5 to 10.
Your sources are half the pages of your essay.
Yeah. Like just the whole next few pages, the last few pages. And so I was like, okay, I found maybe like 3 sources from the internet. This is exhausting. It can't be harder than this to go to the library and find some books on whatever I'm trying to figure out. So I went to the library and it was so easy. I was like shocked that I realized if I had just started at the library at
You would
like
have saved so
books,
much time.
Yeah, I would have, like from then on, I just was able to write my essays in like an hour because I was like, just go to the library. So I went and I found like 10, 20, as many books as I wanted on whatever subject I was researching. And also, these books, I think it's a little bit different now because it feels like anyone can write a book.
Yeah, I was about to ask, what do you think is the difference between back then and now? And I think that's the biggest difference.
Yeah. So, like, back then, these books are, like, ancient. I found these books and I was like, oh, I clearly know the authority of the person writing this book and everything compared to an article on the internet that I couldn't possibly cite properly because I have the book in my hands. I see who the author is, and you can see a lot of the times their credentials in the back, and they have all like when it was published. And back then, it feels like you had to do a lot more to get published.
Right, and those books had pages and pages of sources.
Yeah. Yeah, like those books, I felt like I could trust because they also had sources. And an interesting thing too about like growing up the way I did and having that kind of education, just having a huge amount of sources wasn't enough to get an A, especially in something like persuasive essay writing. You also had to cite sources from the opposite opinion of what you were fighting for. Because that's how, like, that's the formula of a persuasive essay. You need to, like, kind of start with, like, all the problems with your side of whatever, and then you prove your point.
And
later.
what that makes you do is you research the opposing thing of what you're trying to persuade.
And so in that way, I really learned how to research and figure out how to think and how to do things, and just figure out where to find information even at a very early age, and in a very effective way too. What about you?
I'm just thinking right now, I was about to ask, like, what would you do differently if you were every kind of student you are now, but you were kind of plugged in this era? And I was thinking, like, for me, I would just trust anything I'd read on the internet because I'm like, oh, it's on the internet.
It must be true.
It must be true. Just like how back then, when we were kids, like, oh, if it's in the library, then it's true. I mean, like, that's where you find information.
I don't know. I would probably say, like, you just have to read a lot. I would say, I guess still, if I were like a teacher, I'd be like, don't trust anything on the internet. Go to a library and read.
And then some, like, maybe find books that are a little older. Yeah. Maybe before the 90s, before the 80s, maybe something old.
Yeah. Because some books these days that I've seen, like even like I'm really into like entrepreneurship and business, and I was like trying to find as many books as I could to learn more about it. Right,
and in your collection you have books that are kind of these like classics. You've seen them before with the big type.
Like they're old and they're dry.
Right, and then you have the ones that are like newfangled ones with all the pretty, or like the really heavily designed typography.
Or just really modern. Yeah, just really modern, like the way they type titled their books as very modern, like one word, or, you know. And the difference in the quality of information between older books and then the newer books is, well, not all the time, but a lot of times it's really like the newer books are lacking. And that sucks, because it's like if I were a teacher and telling kids like, this is how you do research really well, I'd be like, go to the library, read books, but also be careful about the books you read.
Yeah, I know.
So there's
it was so much simpler back then, where it's just like, oh, if it's a book, it must be true.
Yeah. But yeah, so I learned how to research really, really thoroughly, and at a very young age. So I didn't really have that much of a learning curve when eventually I went to college, and then on and on and on. But what about you?
Yeah, so the school that I went to, they taught everything that you taught, just not as intense. I had to learn MLA format. I had to write dozens of essays in different subjects, you know, for history or for English. And I really like the process of doing and making an essay, because like I tell this to such a nerdy thing to say, but I tell this in conversations with artists or coworkers that like making a piece of art, especially for example, like a background painting or a background drawing, to really make it like awesome, it feels like I'm making an essay. You know, I'm doing the research, and then I'm gathering all this information about how this scene is supposed to look like. And then I just kind of get in there and make a rough copy. There's my rough draft. What do I do after that? I take a look at it, maybe like let it sit for like a couple hours and look at it again and go, oh, I can make this better. So I do this and that. And then all of a sudden I plussed it. Yeah, which is like writing another draft of your essay. And you go on and on and on until you're satisfied. And I really, really like the whole research thing. At school, even when they taught us that like, oh, you need to cite your sources, and you need to be like, you need to have pages like pages and pages of sources. And then when I went to college, I was like, oh, wow, making art it requires the same amount of thoroughness, you know?
So what classes in particular did you realize that research is more than just academic essay writing?
I mean, like, I think what I learned in college, one of the first lessons I learned was, you know, they made us learn about, like, we'll talk about later about like all these amazing artists that our teachers exposes us to, but like the simple things, the little simple things of like, for example, for the background design class that we had, there was an assignment that I was supposed to draw a scene in a old-timey kind of sheriff cowboy kind of saloon type place. And in my scene, I had a wagon. So I just looked at like all the wagons that I thought looked cool, and I just kind of was like, oh, here's this wagon I designed. Put it in the background. And then my teacher was like, that's a nice looking wagon. It's drawn really well. But that looks like a modern wagon that you'd see
in like the park.
In like the park or something like that. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like a wagon's a wagon.
You're like, there's only one kind of wagon.
Right. But then I'm like, what the hell? And then you look up like, oh, 1950s wagon, or for that time period, you look at like, you know, early settlement wagons, like really, really old.
Yeah. Like they built the wagon themselves.
Yeah. They built them like, they built it from cutting trees.
Yeah, they cut the tree.
And then
they made the planks. Yeah. So if you are interested in business and entrepreneurship, I have a book recommendation for you, The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And since none of us have time to read books anymore, head over to audibletrial.com/the Honey and Absinthe podcast for a free Audible trial, where you will get 1 free audiobook or 2 free Audible original audiobooks, so 3 free audiobooks in total. So head over to audibletrial.com/the Honey and Absinthe podcast.
But yeah, like it's the little things like that really surprised me in art school when they taught us how to do a lot of things.
Yeah, that you had to research. Like you didn't realize like
you can't just willy-nilly just pick whatever you think looks cool.
Yeah.
It has to be in context. And if you really want, so my favorite thing is to make things look lived in.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to make things look lived in, you have to like do your research of like, oh, what time period is this? What kind of person would buy this type of furniture? And if this person like was on like constantly sat on this piece of furniture, how dirty could it get? And what kind of stains would it get? That kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to be thorough like that.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff is really interesting to me. And it's really nerdy, but like, I think it's
I
cool.
mean, you're a biz dev artist basically, or like background designer. So,
Yeah.
so it's your job.
Yeah.
It becomes like, so that's something you learn in college. That
Right.
became part of your job.
So since you're a story person, and then you did study Viz Dev
Yeah.
for as long,
like half of the time before I switched over to.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you know most of exactly what I'm talking about. I've seen your your embarrassing Viz Dev portfolio, like old Viz Dev portfolio. But like, so you know everything about that. But like, what's the difference between that kind of design heavy
And
stuff and story?
storyboarding.
Yeah.
So what's interesting is when we were talking about this topic before we were discussing the show notes and stuff, you and I think differently. Like literally, we think differently.
Yeah.
You are a more visual thinker, and I think I'm more balanced. I'm more left and right brain. So I actually don't start with visuals first. And so what I realized when I became more focused in story, a lot of what I did, that I explained in a previous episode that I wanted to be someone who show ran and pitched. So my approach to storyboarding was not just I want to be good at storyboarding and sequential art, but I wanted to be able to write and tell stories. And my own stories, not just you give me a script and then I will board it for you or whatever. Or even for the more board-driven shows, I didn't want to just be the person that came up with scenarios and jokes. I wanted to be able to write a screenplay if I had to, or come up with an entire story. And I actually have won a lot of competitions on essay writing and short story contests and stuff, especially when I was in high school and earlier. So I did a lot of creative writing. So where I came from was I read first, actually. When I would come up with pitches or story ideas, I went to usually nonfiction, because you don't understand how interesting real life is and history and all that stuff until you read about it and you realize, oh, there's no amount of fantasy and fiction that you can conjure up on your own, because real life is already kind of fantastical and amazing. So I start with words and I start with reading in terms of research. And I think that's an interesting approach, because it's similar to people who illustrate for like op-eds and stuff in magazines and stuff. You have to create illustrations based on an article, let's say, an opinion piece or a piece
like
of
the New Yorker.
or whatever. Yeah. And you have to be able to find the point of the article and figure out a visual way to represent it in a way that's really iconic and strong, or tells a really great visual story. So you have to be able to think critically about what you read and then translate it in a completely different medium. And that's similar to storyboarding, comic books, graphic novels, and that kind of thing. So even when I had to illustrate, that's how I thought about it. Like one of the interesting things that I do when I am even designing, let's say, I don't immediately go to photos or imagery.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. I think about what I'm designing and why, and the emotional necessity it needs to have. Does it need to look cool, or does it need to look old? Or I come up with words, and then from those words, then I go into imagery and what's out there and research, that kind of thing. But that's for storyboarding. I think a lot of people who are going into let's say art school or just college in general, or high school, whatever, you're going back to school soon, or you probably already have. One thing that I learned in college, because I'm the girl that like rails against college, I have a lot of opinions, but something that I did benefit from was I had a certain bias towards the kind of art that I wanted to do when I went into college. So at the time, I was really into anime. I was really into Square Enix and Final Fantasy, that kind of thing. Yes. I was a nerd. And I really liked video game art at the time, or what I thought was video game art. And so I went in thinking I knew exactly what kind of art I wanted to learn how to do, which is, all the, you look at all these shiny Viz Dev books when you're in like high school and you get so excited, like, I want to do that. But you don't even know anything about the art world, really. My world at the time, what I knew existed, was so small. I don't think I even knew about like animation art, because I didn't grow up with a lot of Disney or even a lot of DreamWorks.
Yeah, neither did I. Yeah. I didn't know that they made that kind of art,
yeah.
like with pencils and paint, until they showed us in college.
Yeah. And so I knew of like, at the time, like the Skillful Huntsman book. I had that book, and it was like my favorite book ever, because I was like, wow, this is how you design video games.
I want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
Right.
And on the opposite spectrum, I knew what, I don't know, still lives are. And those were like two things that I was like, I don't want to do still lives with my life. I want to do this. And that's what I thought that's all there was. But once I got into college, the whole 4 years, I had a rare experience where I learned a lot of different things. I learned graphic design, typography, logo design, and I also learned illustration. Like everyone learns their foundations, obviously, but then we learned a little bit of what editorial illustration is, and then finally like animation art, video game art, and that kind of thing. And through a lot of kicking and screaming on my end, I think, I was just so like into this shiny digital, in a way, easy to digest art, that like a lot of my teachers had to tell me like, hey, be a little more open-minded and like look into illustrators, look into graphic design, look into these things that even if you hate, it's good to know about.
You'll never know where inspiration will strike.
Yeah. Yeah. So it like, because of that, I'd be like, okay, fine. Okay, fine. I'm gonna do your homework the way you want me to, and appease you by like researching artists that at first glance I did not care about. Like, a funny thing is, I didn't understand Mary Blair for a really long time. I didn't get like this style is so graphic and so simple and so easy to do. That's what I thought in my head.
But did you try it? What did you think when you tried it?
Yeah. So the moment I tried it, I was like, oh,
yeah, okay. That's why Mary Blair is Mary Blair.
Yeah. But like, until you try it, don't knock it till you try it. It's actually it's deceptively simple. Same thing with a lot of what is called naive art and like children's book art, for example, like traditional, not so children's books artwork back in the day. Like, I remember like Hungry Caterpillar and stuff like that.
That looks awesome.
Yeah. That art is like usually done traditionally, then scanned and then digitized into a thing.
Charlie Parker.
Yeah.
Right. Was it Charlie Parker?
He did some, I think.
Yeah.
Charlie Harper. There you go.
Damn it. Charlie Parker's the... Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Charlie Harper.
Yeah. And that it seems simple to come up with circles and squares and different patterns and colors, but it's like half graphic design, half illustration, half color design, and it's beautiful in its simplicity. And so that happened. I think that was actually the first style that like convinced me to like
interesting.
Broaden my mind a little bit
Yeah.
about different stuff that's out there. And then it made me go like, oh, what else have I been really just shunning, I guess, in my mind? And that's actually really useful to know how to do, or at the very least to know of why people like it, why it's important. And it's a lot of ink artists back in the day that I really didn't understand. I forget their name. I think Lautrec. There's a French artist that I really didn't understand.
Toulouse-Lautrec?
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, man, I don't get it. But then once I like, one of our classes, we have to do master copies of these older artists. And there's so many artists that I just like, whatever. That's fine. I don't care. I don't care to be good at doing that or whatever. But once you try it, you realize like, oh, I can actually take a lot of aspects of these artists and their art that's like seems so far removed from what I wanted to do, which was animation art and whatever, and really apply it to our modern day work to make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more like thoughtful.
It makes your art look well researched.
Yeah.
So for me, when I went into art school, I think I mentioned this before, but when I went in, I thought I was going to do something like video games. Yeah, same thing like you. The Prince of Persia game had just come out, the last one that Ubisoft did, and it was this beautiful kind of cel-shaded painterly kind of game. And I was really inspired by that. So I was like, oh, I want to make something like that, or I want to be a part of a project that's like that. But then when I went to art school, they showed me so many things. And one of those things was this class where the teacher had a whole list of illustrators for the past like 100 years or more. And every single week she'd pick from that list, like a small basket, like maybe like 10, 15 of those artists on the list. And then it would be a specific subject, like how they would use black masses with ink, or how they use line weight or something like that. And then she'd have us emulate 2 artists, and then out of that list for the week, and then we're responsible for like making our own original piece based on the 2 artists that we picked. And what it helped us do was really pay attention to how each artist does things differently. And not only that, it kind of encourages you to look for things that that could be your thing, you know? Yeah. And then when you kind of do a master copy of it, you're like, oh, I really like the way this artist used black mass to frame, you know, the subject or the character or something like that. And then it kind of becomes a part of you. And, you know, even though I do background design and all that kind of stuff, that information still comes back, and it helps me figure out little painting techniques or stylistic things for the show that I'm on. And it's really fun. And it's just, college was a great way to expose ourselves to so many amazing artists. Yeah,
and that is, in a way, research. One of the things that I learned how to do was I think I've talked about this overseas like travel abroad program that I was on. Right. And it was very much like they had a theme for the whole project, I guess. And you can decide what you want to do for the theme, because it was an interdisciplinary class. There were photographers, filmmakers,
illustrators, graphic designers,
all sorts of people. So they weren't like, you do this and you do this. They couldn't do that. So they're like, you guys come up with this, make something with this theme in mind. And I decided I wanted to make a children's book, but I had no experience making a children's book. This is the first children's book I've ever decided to make. All I knew was like, how hard could it be? You write a story and you pair it with pictures.
Keep telling the story. I'm going to find the book.
Oh, okay. And it is deceptively simple to just say, I'm just going to write a children's book, because children's books, they are written in a way that is really almost like poetry, at least the best ones. And then the illustrations, they need to, oh God, yes. So this is, Vincent is showing on screen, my very first children's book that I ever wrote and illustrated.
Continue.
Oh God, please don't show the insides.
Are you sure?
Yeah, it's fine. No, it's so bad.
It's not bad. Look at that.
Awful.
It looks like you.
It's awful.
Oh, come on. All right, continue.
And the thing is, like, I didn't know how to make a children's book. I didn't know even how it was formatted, and like how the flow and natural, how many pages there were supposed to be, and all these things. And I really had no help from my teachers whatsoever. So out of frustration, after like weeks and weeks of just failing at trying to come up with a story, trying to come up with illustrations, and like the teachers didn't like anything I was doing, I went to the library and I was like, okay, I need to figure out how to write make a children's book.
The school library?
Yeah, school
By the way,
library.
our school library, pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty great. It has some rare books.
Rare books, and like almost every children's book you could possibly imagine, because they have like all the greatest illustrators.
The greatest books for whatever disciplinary, like creative discipline.
Comics, animation, film,
photography,
graphic
whatever.
design.
So I went to the library and I just grabbed like the whole children's book section and put it on the library
basket.
tables and just went to town and like flipped through, read every single children's book I could possibly find. And I realized, oh, there's a pattern to this. There's a formula. There's things that you have to do that make it, like, once you realize it, it makes it easier to, like, understand, like, okay, there's a, obviously there's a cover, but then there's also, like, the like, nice little patterned insides of the cover. When you open the book, it has usually like nice little graphic patterns, and then it has like an interior cover that's slightly different than the outside cover, and then it has like the credits and like if you want like a thank you page, and then it finally there's an art to like leading your reader into a book in a way that's not like bam, beautiful illustration right at the beginning. It's like, no, this is like a storybook for kids. So like you
gotta ease into it.
Ease into it. Introduce the character a little bit, whatever.
Yeah.
Kids can be easily overwhelmed, whatever. Or you really can just go like bam, beautiful illustration. So it that was research. That was like me figuring out how to do it when like it's like the world is not going to be easy on you. It certainly wasn't on me. No one was going to tell me how to make a children's book. They were just kind of like figuring it out. And that's also, I guess, a really important thing I learned on how to do research in a way that's not just like, oh, you go on the internet and you like, someone tells you exactly how to do it. It was more like hands-on, I guess.
Yeah, it reminds me, oh man, you're going to hear, I feel like people tell this story a lot, especially from our class, but there's this guy who said in the graphic design class, because the assignment was to make a box for a presentation or something like that. And then the student was like, how do you make a box? Like, where do you go? Do you look in the internet? Is there like an instruction? Like, how can I find that out? And the teacher was like, I don't know, just that's your job.
It's
to
not my
find
job.
it out. Yeah, to find it out. And that's kind of, even though you're like, that's not teaching, you're not teaching anybody anything. No, that's a really important lesson, man.
Yeah.
Like what you said, that no one's going to teach you how to do anything. At the end of the day, you kind of have to figure things out on your own. And like, if people can give you advice and help guide you on your way, that's great. But for the most part, especially those types of assignments that we get all the time where we're like, I don't know how to do this. Like say, I don't know how to do a matte painting. I guess I have to figure it out. I don't know how to make a business card. I guess I got to figure it out.
Yeah.
I don't know how to design a postcard, so on and so forth.
But also, I have to add this. There will be teachers that will be like, my way or the highway,
Right.
my taste is best. And again, the benefit that I got out of college was that it did open my mind up
Right.
to be less biased towards exactly what I thought I wanted to do or what I liked. The teachers who are like, no, my way or the highway are the opposite of that. They're like, no, don't think for yourself. Don't think critically. I have all the answers for you. And if you just follow my teachings, I don't know, the world will be handed onto your lap or whatever.
I've gotten students hired before.
Yeah,
they all look like this in terms of their art. All you have to do is look like this.
Yeah.
You know?
Like, sure, maybe, but is that what you want out of your education? To just,
Out of your $200,000
Yeah.
education, if you just knew that you just needed to copy
Yeah.
this artist, then you would have
Exactly.
done it a long time ago.
yeah. Or do you want to like actually learn something?
Get your money's worth.
Yeah.
What do you remember that one class? I think it was called Critical Practice.
Yeah,
right?
something like that.
Yeah, so check this out. For this assignment, the teacher, Brumfield was his name?
Yeah.
Brumfield. Yeah, he okay, so the assignment was I think he gave you a painting,
Yeah.
right?
Or even a still of a frame.
A still
from
of
a
frame
movie.
from a movie, right? But he had to provide it, right? You
Yeah.
couldn't choose for yourself.
No. Yeah.
No, yeah. So he provided a picture, some sort of picture, a photograph, a still from a film, or even a painting. And then our assignment was to write pages and pages of details that you noticed in that photograph, in that
Yeah.
painting, or whatever it is. And that the assignment was just that, and like the more pages you had, the more you could secure that
A. Yeah.
that A grade. So yeah, I remember I think the morning of the class writing, just like writing, just like still like pages and pages of just like, on this corner you can see a brushstroke that looks like it's over, like just the most ridiculous details. But at the end of the day, when that ridiculous assignment was over, I really felt like my eyes got a little bit more sensitive.
Yeah, because what that essay assignment, I think it's supposed to be like a midterm assignment or
Yeah.
something. It sounds ridiculous, and it definitely sounds ridiculous when he tells you like to do this, and you're like, fine, whatever.
I'll do it, fine.
But after you do it, it's supposed to teach you that nothing is accidental. Nothing an artist chooses to do, whether you're a filmmaker, a photographer, a painter, every stroke, everything in the frame was
planned.
placed there.
Right.
Someone decided I'm going, like think about a painting.
Or do it yourself, like make a scene
Yeah.
in your living room, even, and like have your sister or your friend just
Yeah.
sit there. You have to take a lot of things into consideration.
Yeah, like even like let's say a landscape painting or whatever, if there are like birds in the distance, they thought that I needed to put birds in the distance.
To lead your eye.
Yeah, to lead your eye to do this or whatever. And not only that, they thought about what kind of bird is it? The silhouette of a penguin is different than a silhouette of like a pelican or whatever. And so it makes you realize, especially in the form of like paintings and stuff like that like, oh, you have to think about every single little thing. And when you see art, every single thing is thought of. It's like and you can tell when someone is also being not thoughtful
Right.
about their art and whatever their art is, whether it's writing or photography or films or paintings and illustrations or animation. Like you realize like, oh, someone didn't just, because it takes time. It takes time to draw out that bird. It takes time to paint that bird. And if it took like 20 minutes, someone had to sit there and think about that for 20 whole minutes while you just glanced at a painting and you thought like, oh, they just did it. They just made it. Because that's how you are as a beginner artist. You realize, oh, someone just, did it. But no, someone sat there for like weeks and made this thing.
And agonized over every detail.
Yeah. And that's what it teaches you. And on like for people who are really into like filmmaking and like storyboarding and animation and that kind of thing, that's even more true with movies. When you do it for stills of a movie, you realize, oh, a set designer found that object, built that object, made that costume.
That set designer knew to find the object.
Yeah.
It's like the craziest thing. They have like an encyclopedic knowledge of things and the appropriate time period for the thing.
And then someone lit that very specifically in a very specific way. Or if it's like a costume, that red dress that she's wearing is red on purpose because they could have given her a black dress, they could have given her a white dress, whatever dress.
Anything.
And then at the end of the day too, a director wanted that. And
they approved all that.
They wanted that to show up. Or they had absolutely no control, and then you can tell.
Yeah.
You go like, oh, that could have been a red dress.
That was a mess.
But you chose 5,000 colors. So it's kind of ridiculous that we had to do that, to like pick out every single little detail of an image and then like write like a 10+ page essay on it.
I think I was only able to reach, I think the point was to do at least 10 pages. I think I did like 11. Do you remember what you...
because I didn't want to say this, but because I had such a good education in grade school, I really didn't have that much of a hard time with the academic classes in art school because they're... Okay, Vincent's making funny faces at me. But English classes and academic classes in art school are kind of easy. Come on. They're just like whatever classes.
What is a noun?
Yeah, it was a lot of that.
What is a predicate?
And I just was like, and I got lazy. So I got really lazy with the more academic classes, and I'd just be like...
So did you fail Brumfield's assignment then?
No, I got like a B.
Oh. Because so you didn't want to just expend that much effort on something so ridiculous.
8 pages is enough, right? And then I was like, I thought I worked hard.
It was like
B. I was like, really? And then again, I thought I could just coast by because I'm like, oh, these classes are easy.
I don't know. Whenever a teacher goes at least 10, I know they really mean at least 10. I always think like, oh, if I just do what they say, I will get an A, maybe a B+ at the very least. So let's just do what this person says and then do it as quickly as possible. That kind of thing.
All this to say that all this ridiculousness, all this research, all this stuff that we did in college, it really did help our professional careers. And even what I do now, being an artist on the internet, on YouTube.
I think a lot of the foundational stuff really helps with what you're doing with the Honey and Epsom store and all that stuff, right? Doesn't it kind of take you back to illustration classes doing like ink drawings and all these things all over again?
Yeah, in terms of like making illustrations, yeah. And like, for when we do prints, when we do prints and stuff like that, we do it differently than I think a lot of other people do it. Whereas like, even let's say a piece of fan art, it's easy to just be like, I'll just draw the character and that's that. That's the piece of fan art. But what we like to do is we like to read the backstory or watch the backstory of the character and find out a little bit more of the story that they inhabit, so that a lot of the times I like to sneak in little things only
the fan
fans
would get.
would get.
That way the fan really, really feels like they were taken care of with this commission.
Yeah, like whether it's a commission or a print or whatever, I really try to think about what can only I do. I know this is, let's say, a character that has been done like 1,000 times before. Why would someone buy mine? And I think about like, well, what do I like about this character? And if I don't know anything about this character, what their personality is, or their backstory, then I wouldn't be able. Of course, I'll just get lazy and then I'll just draw the character, and that's it. But
yeah, you're really not making it interesting for yourself.
Yeah. Which is why a lot of times we only really make fan art of things that we really care about, because that's a lot of work.
Yeah, we've done fan art of stuff that we don't like, and it feels like a chore.
And I honestly think people can tell.
Yeah.
That's what. So like when we've done fan art of things just to do fan art of things because we think it's popular, it doesn't guarantee a sale. Oftentimes it doesn't sell because I think people would rather buy from someone who made fan art that they really actually cared about, and then you can kind of tell because they'll put those insider things in it, like little, I don't know, trinkets or whatever that the character uses or whatever is really important in the overall story or something like that. How do you use research professionally?
How do I use research professionally? So when I get an assignment, and it's really cool because in the show that I'm on, I'm doing a different style every 3 weeks. It's pretty dope. Mm-hmm. But for example, there's one that we're referencing mid-century modern type backgrounds, right?
Yeah.
So I'd have to really look like what are the characteristics of mid-century modern type backgrounds. And not only that, since we're working traditionally, and back then they used to just paint things with soft body acrylic or gouache or something like that. How can I translate what is done then to now? So I really have to do my research. And you were talking about like what you were doing, what you would do to do story research. Mm-hmm. The way I do it and the way they taught us at school is to, do mood boards and gather as much information as possible. Like you said, I'm a very visual person. So when I'm given an assignment, especially when I was given these types of assignments, these mock type assignments at school, I would like make print after print of like from the library of like different types of props that I could use. Like for example, the wagon thing. I would print different wagons and different types of saloons, and I just post them on my wall or have a whole folder where I would just like sit there and just dream up ideas of what I could make, and then sit there and draw and still research, and that would be like sort of my routine. So for work, they're like, the background needs to look like this. So I go like, okay, so this is the style. Okay, so it's traditional, and it's a lot of shape-based stuff. It's very shape-heavy, not a lot of lines, and if there are, they're sometimes offset, sometimes, or the lines are painted. And I would go in there and then in Photoshop design these big shapes, but then also design like these faux brush strokes, right? To really make it feel like it's of that era. And to the point where if they use some sort of airbrushing or little stippling, or, getting a toothbrush and putting paint on it and letting it splatter, these little splatter marks, I'd have to like really get in there, dig deep and find like a splatter brush, or maybe make my own, and then really make it as authentic as possible. And that's one of my favorite things to do, like to really trick people to think that my digital drawing is a traditional drawing, because I know how to do both. We were trained how to do both. So it's funny when you're actually painting something, these things feel more like happy accidents, or sometimes you can control it, dry brushing, so stuff like that. You could kind of control it. But in digital, you kind of have to design it in. My thing is like, I kind of solve all the problems for the painting, like in terms of value and color. And then I go in, dig deep, and like really kind of make it not so perfect, make it imperfect.
It's always fighting against the slick, perfect digitalness of the Photoshop. Yeah,
for example, if you are emulating something like from mid-century modern, you would have a lot of shapes. But the thing is, when you really look at these shapes, because they're hand painted, they're not perfect. Even with tape, even if they try to tape it down, you see sometimes that like maybe they didn't tape it properly enough, or maybe it bled here or there. And it's those types of little details that I love adding to my paintings, man. And like I ask you all the time, like, why did you quit VizDev? This is the shit. This is like, I love the richness of detail and like finding little nuggets of like, ooh, I want to add that to my thing because it's going to make it look really authentic or something like that.
And I always go, because I hate that. It's like I could do it, but man, I do not want to sit there for like 5 minutes smudging things and adding texture. And I'm like, I just like
can't it be done?
Yeah, why can't it be done already? It explains why I like storyboards. You finish it in like 5 minutes.
Quick drawings. Right.
But yeah, I'm more of a bigger picture type of person, which is why I like looking at a whole of a story and figuring out like what it needs. What that person is wearing, you can decide. I do not care.
It needs to be a jacket that's
Like,
kind of worn in because his grandfather gave it to him.
Like I care.
And it's like a loving memory for him. It's
Yeah.
like an artifact of days old.
I care, but I
care so
know
much.
I know that like you will do a great job. So you just do it for me, because I know that you know exactly what time period they need to be. I don't need to spell it out for you.
It needs to look like dark, earthy brown.
Yeah, you can make those decisions.
Have like the poofy things on the column.
But yeah, so I talked about how like I use research now for like printmaking and stuff like that. But again, I always more than ever, I use words and I read in order to come up with video ideas, stories for like storyboards and stuff like that, and even clothing, even apparel and prints. So what I mean by that, so what I see a lot of people doing is they will go on Pinterest or Instagram and they will kind of kit bash what's popular, what's trending, what's trendy.
We've done that before, tons of times.
In a way, it's kind of the animation biz dev artist's job.
Yeah, it's to know like what's in the zeitgeist, what's popular and marketable. Oh, this look? Oh, let's just do this look to death.
Yeah. But my problem with that is that it's very cannibalistic, incestuous in the kind of art that comes out eventually, because then you get everything looks the same, or that just looks like that person's work, or that just looks like that person's work, or this just looks like 10 different people's work all put together, and it's like weird. And in a way, it guarantees a certain amount of success on apps like Insta. Like, it's so interesting. I've been on enough social media apps where I feel like there's a look for Instagram, there's a look for Tumblr, there's a look for TikTok, there's a look for YouTube. And it's so fascinating that none of it really crosses over. Like, there's just, if you want to get popular on a certain app, you just do what the app likes, I guess, which I think is really sad, in terms of when you just want to be an artist. Like, you just want to create and be creative and do something that is uniquely yours sometimes, and not just get likes and not just get like fake adoration or whatever.
So now that you're doing a lot of the company art and stuff like that, how do you balance knowing what exactly is in vogue and popular in terms of style, and how do you balance your own self-expression and making things that you are happy with?
I pretty much don't.
Good answer.
Yeah, so I feel like there was a period of time where that mattered to me, because I was in animation. I wanted to know what is popular. I wanted to know what would get likes, what would get me hired, or whatever. But what I really didn't like about that was that like I never felt like I had my own thing, my own voice. Or I always felt like I'm like a copy of this, I'm a copy of that, or I'm just, but like a discount version. Like, I'm not quite
dollar
as good.
store version.
Yeah. And that bothered me. And for a while, when I didn't want to do that anymore, I kept looking at Instagram, I kept looking at Pinterest, and I wonder why my art still looks so like everyone else's. And after I quit, I completely kind of stopped looking at Instagram and stopped looking at Pinterest and stopped looking at all these things. And what that did was make me more unique in what I was drawing because I wasn't really looking and referencing it. Even subconsciously, sometimes you will do it. So I just don't anymore. And if I do end up doing it, it's like a last resort. And most of the time I'm looking at photographs, not other artwork.
Yeah, I noticed your process is to, as much as you can for the figure, take a picture of yourself, if not me, depending on the body type. And then you wouldn't go on Pinterest for style. You would go to Pinterest for fashion and detail on the clothing.
Yeah.
Like for boots and things like that.
Yeah, to see how it's structured. Because
Yeah.
you think you know how to draw a boot until you draw a boot. And then you realize I don't actually know what
This is kind of whack
it
boot.
looks like. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know an idea of what like a Final Fantasy character's boot looks like, but I
Straps.
Yeah,
Lots
lots of straps and whatever. But you don't actually know. You don't actually know like, oh, there's a seam here because that's how it's made. Someone had to like sew that leather onto it like that in order for the shoe to look like that. And then on that seam, there's like another seam because you need to like seal the leather and do all this stuff. So like you don't actually know that till you draw it from reference, not from a copy of an artist that you like who already did that. They went and looked at a boot and they simplified it in the way that they simplified it. And now you're just simplifying their version of the way they simplified it. So like it becomes like you don't actually know what you are drawing. You're just copying what you think is good. So I do that. But again, I read a lot. It's how I figure out what video topics people actually care about. A lot of it, I can I can go into all the algorithm and all the YouTube whatever research that I do, but for the most part, it's a combination of like what I actually care about, what I want to talk about, and a combination of like reading all the news and seeing what people are talking about and what people actually care about and what I can add to that conversation. I have to write a lot these days in order to, like, I don't really script my videos anymore, but in a way it's at least outlined. And I actually write a lot, and I write a lot of ideas, and I write, and you can't write well unless you read a lot, unless you have a lot of knowledge to draw from. And then also, like, we haven't done it as much recently, but like when we come up with stories, like for a pitch or stuff like that, I always draw from stuff that I've read. And if I haven't read a book in a while, I feel dumb. I feel like I can't write, and I feel like I can't come up with any good stories. And when I have read, I realize like, oh, I am not quite as great of a storyteller as just real life events that happened. I'm not as creative as whoever controls the simulation.
Yeah.
And so, and like, there's this thing that we watched on Masterclass. We were watching Ken Burns teach his Masterclass, and it is like the best Masterclass, in my opinion, that I have seen out of all the teachers.
Yeah. And what he says actually applies to all sorts, not just documentary filmmaking, just filmmaking in general.
It's how important research is. And one of the examples that really like hit home for me was when he was talking about framing. And he was saying he found, I think it was either the Vietnam War or World War II, where they were like storming Normandy or something like that. One of those. I don't remember which one.
World War II is when they stormed.
No, I know. It was either an event in Vietnam or
Story. Oh, I see.
Where they were on a beach. He found this photograph of a still from a video where an American soldier, was on a beach, and behind him, a guy was just shot, and he's like, "Wow, this old photo is amazing. I need to find the video." And he finds the video, and it's framed a little bit wider, and he realizes, because of the framing, now suddenly you see more of the beach, which means you see more people on the ground who have just been shot. So now it used to be one person who got shot. Now it's like 3. And then he goes, "Wow, let's go find the negatives for this footage." And so he goes and he somehow finds the negatives. And the negatives show a lot more of the beach. Whoa. And he realizes it's not just 3 people who died this day. It was a whole entire beach full of people. All these bodies in the water, and all these bodies on, like, just hundreds and hundreds of people. And there's like only a few people who are walking on the beach. And he said, like, that's the power of framing. Mm-hmm. If you don't know the whole picture, how are you supposed to tell a good story about it? And I was like, wow, you are such an intelligent human being. And like, it really, like, stuck with me that, like, how do you know when to stop researching? I don't think anyone has a good answer for you.
The best thing to do is have an end date to your research. Yeah. And that's as much as you could do.
A deadline, yeah. But at the end of the day, that's why it's so important. It's like, how can you possibly make a good image, tell a good story if you didn't do your research? Like, just a simple, like, idea like that. Like, I want to find where this photograph came from, and then I want to find the negatives of this footage. Like, it changed everything, and it made the story so much more interesting, and it made the image more interesting, because now that image of, like, this beach full of people who died fighting for whatever, is like 1,000 times more powerful than the original image. And so, yeah, that's the power of research, you guys.
Okay. All right. So today we are going to recommend the movie, and the movie is by Sidney Lumet, Fail Safe.
Yes. Yeah. It's actually kind of pertinent to the topic, because this movie seems really well researched.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, so I think we watched some supplementary material. This movie was on the Criterion channel for a bit. I'm not sure if it's still there. You might have to find it on Amazon or Amazon Prime. But apparently it was written by political strategists. Mm-hmm. And it's a really awesome movie. And the whole there's a lot of, it's very pertinent to the conversation we just had, because it's a lot about information and misinformation and the consequences of lack of communication,
And so, like, quick summary of Failsafe. It's during the Cold War, and it's about our president at the time trying to avoid disaster with Russia, a very bad misunderstanding, and avoid bombs, and
avoid catastrophic disaster, and millions of lives being lost. Right.
And the movie is about dealing with this awful misunderstanding, and it's gripping. It's thrilling, and you are on the edge of your seat the whole time, because you're like, any wrong word by the translator or the president or whoever could result in the next World War. And it's fascinating in the simplicity too, because it's kind of an acting movie in that, like, there's no huge amazing sets.
Pieces. It takes place in what they constructed in the movie to be the war room and mission control, that type of stuff. And it's a lot of talking heads, really tight shots, very simple, nothing too crazy.
And what they're able to accomplish, the amount of, like, thrill and tenseness that they were able to achieve, and just reveal of information and hiding of other information and stuff like that is amazing on like a story level. It's amazing. And it also pairs well with another movie.
Yeah. And if you want a palate cleanser because fail-safe will make you sweat.
Yeah.
Definitely. Watch Doctor Strangelove, which is the same exact themes, almost the same exact events take place, but it's told with the lens of dark satire,
Yes.
humor,
Yes.
cheeky dialogue, things like that.
Yes. My brand of humor.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Doctor Strangelove, Stanley Kubrick. You love Stanley Kubrick, yes?
Yes. I think Stanley Kubrick is a hilarious, intelligent man. And his biting satire and his way he views the world is exactly how I view the world. It's hilarious.
But yeah,
Yeah.
we hope you enjoyed that. Please let us know in the comments what you think of those movies and what you thought of this topic.
Yeah, make sure to smash
Over there.
the like button and jingle all our bells and buttons for new videos every Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Check us out at honeyandabsinthe.com for our merch. I am wearing the fight shirt today. Everything you buy helps support this channel. And follow us on all the things at Honey and Absinthe. And we'll see you in the next one.
Bye-bye.
Bye.